All right, hi. So thank you guys so much for joining tonight. Why don't we start with just introductions? So Mylin, Brian, do you want to just tell everyone your name, you're in medical school, what school you're attending, and what degree or degrees you're pursuing?
Hey everyone, my name is Brian. I'm a third year medical student. I go to school at Western U, which is not too far from UCLA. It's in a small town of Pomona, which happens to be the smallest, I mean, not the smallest, but the easternmost like city in Los Angeles County. So still in LA. A little bit about myself. I went to UCLA. I actually know Mylin from my UCLA years. Um, and yeah, I'm I'm sorry, I'm kind of tired right now. It's been a really long week. I'm on my cardiology service, um, but I'm really excited and happy to share my story and help you guys however I can.
Hi everyone, my name is Mylin. I'm a first year medical student, osteopathic for KCU. I moved to KC. I'm originally from Orange, California, and I'm pursuing a DO degree as well as a master's in bioethics.
Okay, awesome. So I was thinking since you guys both went to UCLA that we could kind of gear the first couple questions towards your UCLA experience. So my first question for you guys is what did you study at UCLA, whether it was your major or minor if you did any, and do you feel that this helped you feel like more prepared for medical school?
I can go first. I think Brian and I graduated with the same degree. So I transferred to UCLA during my third year. I was automatically put into biology, which is evolutionary and ecology and evolutionary biology. I like the major mainly because I had freedom to choose any bio class that I wanted to take. I wasn't very specific on, just like phi-sci or MING or MCDB. Like I could choose whichever class and it would fill out my prereqs. I thought that was nice because I got to explore which bio classes I wanted to take. Overall, I wouldn't say like undergrad prepared me for medical school, but being able to just study whichever topic that you enjoy, that's the biggest thing. But in medical school, like as you'll learn, a lot of people change their ways of studying. And now that I finished my systems blocks, which means like I finished cardio, pulm, neuro, all of that, I'm actually starting a second year course, and I'm actually going to try and gear my learning differently with this course now that I'm learning more like medicine based science. So I feel like your learning techniques change throughout the years, but as long as you find something that works for you, try to hold on to it, but it's always okay to change. And I think undergrad helped me with that as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like Mylin, I did bio, and I don't necessarily think that the major itself really helped me or prepared me for medical school. I think the intensity of UCLA in general certainly played a role in helping me succeed in medical school, but I don't know if bio necessarily did. Looking back after like 2 years of like didactic classroom stuff at Western, I do kind of wish I had a stronger physiology background. So part of me does wish that I like took maybe harder courses that are like well known for being full of gunners and full of pre-meds, because I think those classes do really set you up well for med school. But at the same time, like I also don't regret it because I probably would have done as well in those classes as I did for like conservational bio or like ecological biology, which were pretty easy A's at UCLA. So I think it's a balancing act. One that I wish I was a little more cognizant of in the past.
Just to feed off of Brian's physio. So physio is very big in medicine from what I've learned from the last couple blocks that I've had. And I think something that helped me personally was that I actually took animal physio with Brian with Esden. And I honestly remember a lot from that class, which kind of helped me with my foundation. So It's not a tip that I'm saying like you should do, but it personally helped me.
Okay, awesome. And just to quickly jump in, since we have a few chat questions already, can you guys just restate what schools you go to and then also add in information about whether you did post-backs or gap years?
Hi, so I'm Mylan. I'm a first year at KCU. I'm pursuing a osteopathic degree as well as a master's in bioethics. I took a couple gap years. I was a behavioral therapist for a year and a half, and then I worked at a primary care office as a personal assistant to a doctor.
I'm Brian. I'm a third year med student at Western. I also took a few years off. I worked in IT at UCLA for 2 years, and then I did a post-bac slash like special master's program at Western, and that helped matriculate me into the school here.
Okay, awesome. Definitely going to ask a few more questions about the gap years in a little bit, but kind of staying in the vein of UCLA for now. Can you guys also talk about what sorts of extracurriculars you were involved in, and particularly the ones that you think helped you with getting into medical schools and even just being in medical school?
So for me, I don't think anything I did in UCLA really helped, honestly. I was in AFIO. I just did it because I transferred and I just wanted to make friends. Something that I regret that kind of had a disadvantage of was that because I was a transfer, I couldn't obtain research as quickly, mainly because I didn't know. And basically, if you don't get it by your winter quarter of third year, you're kind of screwed because they want someone that will stay a couple years. At least from that was my experience when I was there. I think what made me stood out was my gap years more so.
Okay, sorry. So I have a delay in response because I'm actually bringing up my CV from college because I completely forgot everything that I've done. Um, so I was really heavily involved in USAC actually, and I don't think that's necessarily helped me too much. I think the networking and the skills that I've learned helped me in like other ways, and I guess indirectly helped me in med school and helped me get into medical school. But I wouldn't say it necessarily like sprungboard like my career forward. I did do research with some prominent individuals, and I think that really helped me. I was a part of City Lab, which was a ton of fun, and I think that helped me. I was also a part of APA Healthcare, and that helped me and teach. I think they still have these programs, and that certainly helped me too. So I think the more pre-medi like community service based organization really helped me on my brand. Because when I applied to med school and when I interviewed, and even now, like as I'm thinking about residency and applying to different programs, like our advisors tell us to think about our brands and think about what we've done and how we can present ourselves as like people, to these different programs. And my story was all about like serving the disenfranchised and working with the underserved because I come from a similar situation. So that was kind of like my cohesive kind of thing. So for me personally, all those programs helped.
Okay, awesome. So now just transitioning into kind of like applying to medical school, I was wondering if you guys can maybe talk about your experiences, maybe with like the financial aspect of applying to medical school or just your personal background, since a lot of our attendees are first gen low income, and maybe how that sort of like helped you or maybe not so much helped you during the application process.
So I think something that's really important that you guys should do is for AAMC and for e-commerce, if you apply to DO, definitely apply for their what is it, like financial waiver or whatever. So I know you can do this for like the MCAT. AAMC gives you MSAR for free, which is a huge resource. And then it also gave a ton of discounts when applying for medical school Because when you apply for medical school, you apply for the primary and then you apply for each secondary per school that you apply to. And for me, when I applied for that waiver through AAMC, I didn't have to pay for secondaries, which saved me like thousands of dollars. Yes, the FEED assistant program, correct. And all MCAT resources are free. Very important, will really help you for the MCAT.
Yeah, I don't really remember the application process, so I think Mylin hit it all. Oh, I will say this though. If you guys take gap years, um, and you are like in the middle of studying and like working, um, I would actually advise like to focus on one thing and whole ass that one thing instead of half-assing like working and half-assing studying, because in the end of the day you're just gonna like screw yourself over. I think one benefit that people who come from less like one benefit that like I guess rich folks or like middle class folks really have the advantage of is they could just study and not worry about like how they're gonna live. And that's unfortunately not the case for us. So, and I know this is like advice that's not necessarily gonna be the best, but honestly, if you are gonna take time off, please don't half-ass like either thing, just whole ass one thing. So like if you have to just hustle really hard, make some money, and then dedicate like 2 months or 3 months to studying for your MCAT, and that's really going to set you up for success into like in terms of getting into medical school.
I agree with that 1,000%. I was in the same boat. I wasted so much time just doing both at once, and it was just overkill. I've seen my friends do it. They're taking multiple gap years more than they want to. Like, if I were you and I was taking a gap year, I would immediately study for 3 months, take the test, not have to deal with it again, make money afterwards.
All right, awesome. That was really good advice. So, I know, Brian, you said you don't really remember much about the application process, but this question is pretty geared towards that. So I'm wondering how you guys kind of decided what schools to apply to and what school to attend based on like financial resources or just interest or like the school environment and culture and anything that you factored in.
So I think I can say more to this because I'm only a first year, but for me, how I chose which schools is based on MSAR, which basically gives you like the mission of the school, the vision, their stats, and like etc. And so I think that's really important because I geared it based on my stats. So if their stats match mine, then it would be basically around where I would apply. And then you would want some of your highs that you think is a little bit overreach, but you still want to go for it. And then you have your lows, which are your technical backups, but you never know what could happen.
Yeah. So I guess I could add something into the financial aspects. DO schools and private schools in general are a lot more expensive than public schools and MD schools. So like a school like UCLA is gonna be like literally like 4 years at UCLA would be probably like maybe $10,000 or $20,000 more expensive than 1 year at Western. It's the price difference is pretty astronomical. Um, so like if and that shouldn't like deter you, because like at the end of the day you're gonna make more money than you like ever thought you would. So you'll eventually pay off that debt, but it is something to really consider. And for me, I guess I'm like really, really doom and gloom right now because I'm like so tired. But for people like us, when you're in the middle of it, and especially in your third year, if you ever think about quitting, you just can't, because you're like over $100,000 in debt, and the only way you can dig yourself out is the career that you already set your path on. So my advice to every pre-med, especially those who come from humble beginnings, is to really make sure that you want to be in medicine and that you really want to do this. Because if you're doing this for money or you're doing this for vanity, it's honestly just not worth it.
Okay, awesome. Very genuine advice, so thank you. So moving on to med school itself, I was wondering if you guys could talk about maybe some of the specialties that you've been exposed to. So I know, Brian, you mentioned that you're currently on your cardiology rotation, and just kind of in that vein, what specialties your schools offer for like clerkships and rotations, and also just what you're currently considering pursuing.
Okay, I can go on and on. So I'm like halfway through my third year, and I've done like a bunch of rotations. I've done like family medicine, internal medicine, orthopedic surgery. Um, Now I'm in cards now. I did like an OMM rotation, psychiatry, and I don't know if I mentioned OB/GYN and peds, but I did all those. So I did like a lot of our the core clerkships. I'm a really big fan of cardio right now, and I don't know. I just think it's a lot of fun. I think it like exposes us to different like parts of the body, ironically, because everything really is connected to the heart. And when one thing is failing, like it's gonna affect the heart, you know. Um, but it's like it's also a field that allows me to like work with my hands, but also think, but also like be really like interactive with my patients, and also be really interactive with my like residents slash my colleagues. So it's just a really vast field. Um, and I guess I don't know how I could relate it to being a pre-med, but I think just like majors in college, I think half, if not more, of my classmates have actually changed their mind on what specialty they want to go into, especially during third year, actually. I went into med school thinking I wanted to go into neurosurgery, and then I failed my first neuro block, and I was like, okay, never mind. I'm like not cut out for this. And then I realized I really am not cut out for it, and I really don't like it. So I changed my mind like 4 or 5 times in third year alone. Um, so I guess my advice, I'm just trying to be preachy, I guess, is to be really open-minded in terms of like your major, what now that you're in pre-med, but also to be like open-minded in like what specialty you want to go into. But medicine is like super vast. Like there's so many different specialties for what you want to do. If you want to have a chill lifestyle, there's something for you. If you want to like be in the thick of things, there's definitely something for you too.
Yeah, so I agree with Brian in the sense like you do change your mind a lot. One of the first things that anyone has ever said to me when I first started med school was that like whatever you think you want to do now, like you're probably definitely going to change your mind later on. And the thing that's different about me and Brian is that I just started didactic year and I'm about to be done with just half of it. But Brian's actually doing rotations, so he's actually witnessing like what's going on and how it actually works and the type of lifestyle that you use. The thing about me is that I have a autism background. I was a behavioral therapist. I worked with autistic kids, and that's why I'm really interested in child neurology, just because that would lead me to where I'm interested in. But currently, I say that, but like you don't really know, until you actually are in the dirt of it. And so I've been reaching out to like research, and I'm considering like shadowing just to see what the lifestyle is. I think lifestyle is very important because your specialty kind of determines your lifestyle, which is a huge part of your life for the rest of your life. So being able to experience it will definitely give you a good like idea of what you want to do later on. And so another thing is that in pre-med, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be a doctor. And then, you change your mind at school, like you get to join clubs, but with the specialty that you're interested in, but you might change your mind as well when you go into rotations. So you never really know. And just to like answer some of the questions that people are talking about. So Brian and I are going to be DOs. And so they're basically MDs, but we have one extra skill set that MDs don't have, which is OMM, which can be its own specialty. It's basically being able to diagnose and to treat people with your hands, which is something that MDs don't teach, but can learn through us, DOs. So that's a different aspect as well.
Okay, awesome. So I'm glad you actually mentioned that you guys are both in different years in medical school, because that does lead me sort of to my next question that has to do with like being involved with extracurriculars during medical school. So I know, Mylan, you're in your didactic year, and Brian, you're in the middle of your rotations. So what kind of involvements can you still have as a medical student at like different points in your like school career?
I don't know for Brian, but it seems like for my school, you don't really join clubs during third year because you're off on rotations and you're probably too busy for it. For me, like, because I started school like on Zoom, everything was on Zoom, and so everything was free and it was very easy access. And they actually were able to gather more doctors who are willing to make time to introduce themselves and explain like what they do and how their day to day is and give advice and etc. Because it's through Zoom, so they don't have to drive to the school and like be like that. But obviously, when you guys start med school, it's gonna be very different from how I started med school. I think clubs are fun, but to me, they're not important too much unless you have like a leadership role. Other than that, you can create clubs. My school is very open to that. We actually just created a double API club in medicine because of what's going on with everything. And then today I was actually in a meeting for wilderness medicine. They just started that club. So whatever interest you have, if you are passionate enough, you can create a club, and that's probably no problem with your school as long as they approve it. So the thing about what I've learned for pre-med and for us as medical students is having a passion, whatever you want to do. And one of the questions is like what can I do during COVID? It's whatever you can find that you can contribute, that you have a passion for, that you can talk about during interviews. I think that's the biggest thing that you can take away from what I can tell you.
Yeah. I'm actually on the opposite spectrum of that. I think I'm way too involved to like my detriment. So I joined this organization called SOMA. It's also known as the Student Osteopathic Medical Association. And that's kind of like, if you guys know what the AMA is, it's like there's a DO side of that, which is also known as the AOA, and they have a student branch. So I joined that in my school and I rose up the ranks, and then I eventually became a national leader. So I got really, really involved in the national scene and like the national politics of osteopathic medicine. So there's pros and cons to that. Like the con is that I haven't been able to study as much as I would like, and my board scores have definitely suffered for that. But the pros is that I have a lot of connections and I know a lot of people who can help me and can probably mitigate a lot of those deficiencies. So from what I gathered, there's like a lot of different types of people in medical school. I think that the number one thing that everyone talks about is their board scores. So once you are in med school, the testing doesn't stop. And if you think the MCAT's the worst thing that ever like fell in your lap, like wait until you hit board season. And like Mylan's like knows exactly what I'm talking about. So your boards is this one test and you can only take it one time. So if you fail the test, you can take it again. But if you fail the test, you might as well like not be a doctor because the chances of you matching drop significantly, like astronomically. So you want to pass the first time, right? But once you pass, you're not allowed to take it again. So if you barely pass or you get a score that you're really not happy with, too bad. That score sticks with you forever. So the prevailing thing is that everyone wants to do really well for their like step one score. Fortunately for you guys, that they're actually like making it past no pass when you guys are in med school. I don't know if it's the same for you, Mylan. And
It's
no one really.
yeah, I'm the
Well,
first year that they start that.
oh, that's so nice. And then they switch everything to step two, which is like much better. So step one is all about like the most mundane things. It could be like, what bacteria has this one specific type of protein? And you just have to know it, right? Whereas step two, it's just like, if this person has heart failure and they're like short of breath, what do you want to do? And you want to like diurese them so that they pee out all their fluids, right? So it's things that like step two is like things that make sense and things that you're actually going to use in like medicine, where step one is just like a bunch of minutia. But I digress. So yeah, so like everyone will tell you that you want to focus on your standardized testing in medical school, and then how you approach like getting into your specific residency branches from there. Some people are really into research, and like specialties like neurosurgery or like cardiothoracic surgery or urology or anything that's super competitive. You're gonna lean more towards research. Whereas if you are like interested in very specific programs like like UCLA Harbor or all of you UCLA or like even LA County, then you want to focus your branding and your extracurriculars on serving the underserved because that falls in line with their mission. So medical school is also really flexible in that sense, in that you kind of have to be very cognizant of what your image is and what reputation you want to portray. I'm sorry, that was really long-winded.
It's okay. So, kind of just going off of what Brian was talking about, STEP and all of that. So, step one is for ND schools, technically. And then for us, we have COMLEX, but they're kind of similar. They're both boards. You take both as a DO. And Caleb asked the question of whether or not we can participate with traditional residency programs. Yes, you can. The merge hasn't even, or the merge is happening now, I think, between MDs and
Yeah,
DOs.
the merge
But
is done.
yeah, so, but even previously, you could still apply and be trained just like any other doctor.
All right, awesome. That was super informative. So I'm glad you also touched on the DO and the merge because I did want to kind of bring that up with you guys since you're like on the DO front face of it all. But kind of moving on to like current events, I guess. So with coronavirus still kind of like ongoing, it's affecting a lot of like current students' applications. Do you think this is going to like change the way that medical schools review applicants or even affect the way that medical school is just in general?
So I can probably attest to this the most since I started school during a pandemic. Everything I do is online except for the fact that I have OMM lab every week. Last semester, like they were really on top of it. They every day I had to sign in and be like, I didn't see 10 people at one place without a mask. Like they were making sure like we were COVID compliant and that everything was online and that everything was available online. So like I think the professors had more opportunity to have office hours, in my opinion, because they would have like blocks of the whole day, just like office hours. You can come in, stop by Zoom, like talk to them anytime. So that was a little bit convenient. But in terms of application, I think, again, if you are passionate about something and you make it shown that you are still pursuing it some way, somehow, even through COVID, it really shows a lot about you, and that's what they're looking for during an interview. And so for me, like when I'm applying for research right now, it's kind of hard because there's still like, COVID is still going on and like a lot of projects were halted. So it's a little difficult, but you just got to push through and hopefully you can find something remote because everything is pretty much remote nowadays. So you just got to keep applying and do whatever you feel is passionate and see what you can do from there. But in terms of how they view interviews, so everything's online now. So it's really hard, in my personal opinion, it's really hard to gauge who you are as a person through Zoom, but that's just what they have to do. That's what that's just how it is. I don't know how the application cycle is going to be for next cycle, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of similar, just depending on whether or not they would ask you if you got vaccinated or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know how much I'll be able to contribute to this, but I have to agree with my Lynn. I know in terms of like matching to residencies, like since no one has to travel anymore, people are more easily able to do these interviews. So like during residency, like fourth year when we interviewed for residencies, typically we would travel to like the location and interview there. And usually what that means is that you're limited to like 6, 7, 8 interviews for your entire season, and that's it. But last year was the first year that they really had to do everything with the pandemic and everything over Zoom. So people are interviewing like 20, 30 like places, which is unprecedented. And it actually changed like everything, like in terms of how these residency programs operate. I imagine that it would be pretty similar with med school. They're probably not going to interview like so much more just like these residency programs are, but I think it actually makes things easier for people who can't afford the travel because now you can just like you apply to NYU, they give you an interview, like, why not? Like, you just have to log in, just dress up. Whereas before, like, you had to find a place, you have to go to Manhattan, you have to find a place to live for like a day or two and to do the interview. And that's just so prohibitively expensive. So I think this is going to be a good thing for people like us. But I think the bad side is that people are aware of that and they're probably going to apply to more places now. And it's probably going to make things a little more competitive. I also read somewhere that I think the pandemic has caused like an all-time high for like pre-med slash like med school applications. So I'm not quite sure how that votes for everyone. I'm sorry if that's news that you didn't want to hear, but that's kind of the reality of things right now. I'm sorry.
When he was talking about traveling, finding a place to stay, blah blah blah, you do that for med school interviews too, by the way, like normally. So you save a lot of money, but there's a pros and cons.
All right, only moderately stressful as I'm about to apply, but that was super helpful. So I'm just going to start going through some of the questions that people left in the chat. So a little bit earlier in the panel, I think this was meant for Mylin. Someone asked, were there any schools that looked negatively on your community college courses?
No, so I took all my prereqs during community college, and so I didn't take any classes like afterwards. And I think that's what they looked poorly on, because if you're trying to like skip out on your core classes when you're at UCLA to do it in a community college after you graduate, that looks bad. And I think that's what they would look down upon. But if you do it beforehand, then they can't punish you for that.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of friends who went to community college and eventually ended up in med school. I don't think they look at it at all, really. So I agree with Mylan. Like, if you do a few core classes at UCLA, then it's all the same to them. And you ace them all, it's all the same to them.
Okay, awesome. And then this question was for Brian. So how did you feel the need to do SMP at Western if you did post-bac? Sarah would love to know your recs.
Yeah, so I think it was a good program for me. I thought I was more mature than I was. And then once I did the program, I think it just gave me time to like figure out my academic maturity. Like, I didn't study often, even at UCLA, I didn't study too much. I just kind of skated by and then crammed at the last second. And I think Mylan hit something that was like super crucial in terms of like your medical professional career, in that you really need to learn how to learn and learn how you learn best. Everyone does it differently. Some people like to watch videos, some people like to listen to lectures, some people like to write notes down, some people like to like act it out. I don't know. But there's different types of learning, and that's something that I had no idea about myself, especially in undergrad. And I think my master's program had really helped me hone in on that skill, like developing how I learn best on different subjects. So for instance, like something like cardio, I would be a lot more visual than something like neuro for me. Just because neuro doesn't, there's like all these pathways and they don't necessarily make sense. And that's like, and yeah, so like that master's program, I wouldn't say the master's program itself was very beneficial, but like that gave me time to really mature. And hopefully that, like what I tell you now, you can kind of implement it in your UCLA career now, so you can kind of have that leg up over your peers.
I'm going to give you an advice that I've learned when I started med school, was that my school also has a master's of bioscience program too. And a lot of the people that was in that program maturated my year. And those people who were in that program knew all the professors, they had the upper advantage, and they just knew how to study because they knew the professors already. And as someone who just came in, haven't been in school for so many years, that was kind of annoying, but hey, it gave them an upper advantage. And if that's what you're going for, that's the advice I got for you.
Awesome, thank you. So another question we had in the chat was, did you consider any different professions before committing to being pre-med and going down the DO route? And if so, I guess like what advice would you give to students that are kind of struggling with that decision right now?
I was actually pre-vet when I started UCLA, and then my grades plummeted, and I was like, all right, career change. And then I chose the second most oversaturated career choice for some reason. For me, the reason why I chose it wasn't I had this idea like I had to be a doctor or something like that. I worked at the hospital. I really enjoyed it. I saw what they did, and that's what I wanted to be, and that's my story. And that's why for me, when people tell me that they're pre-med, I'm like, go to a hospital, see what it's like, see if you actually like it. Because if you've never been in a clinical setting, like it's a lot different than what you would expect, to be honest. And if you can handle it, perfect, great. You love it, perfect, even better. That gives you the skill and motivation and perseverance to go through this long, long, long journey. But that's what you need, you know? Like you can't, like what Brian said, you can't just do it for money or for vanity or for whatever. Like you gotta have to actually like it because it's a grueling, grueling path. And yeah, it's a very long marathon. And it doesn't end after you graduate residency. Like you're learning for the rest of your life. You're dealing with patients and handling a lot of things for the rest of your life. It's exhausting. So you better be ready for that.
We're both clearly very happy med students. Um, but that's so true. Like it is a lifelong journey. And like I think one thing that my master's program like really honed in on this, and I thought it was so corny, but I use it for all my personal statements now because it's so corny. But like essentially medicine is lifelong learning. And as a doctor, you're a lifelong learner. And that's just the fact of it. Like medicine always changes. You'll always have board exams. So even as an attending physician, you will still have to get reaccredited every like 5 to 10 years, and you have to be up to date. You have to keep reading, and you have to take the test and pass. And if you don't, then you're not board certified. But like Mylin said, I think you have to be in the hospital and really see what it's like. And I would definitely say that like going to a clinic like kind of exposes you to some of the paperwork. It exposes you to some of the BS, some of the difficulties. But for the most part, you get this glorified, chill version of what medicine is. And when you go to the hospital, like things hit the fan like really quickly. Like today, I was in the ICU and a patient just like stormed out and started like attacking the nurses, and we had to like put him down with some like sedatives. And that's just like it's not like super common, but that's just the reality. Like people in the hospital are at their worst. For most of them, it's their worst day of their lives. And we are going to continually be there when they're at their worst, you know? So I think it's best to kind of expose yourself to probably one of the worst case scenarios, so you really know what you're doing. To answer the question, I considered doing IT for a bit because it was really cool. Like it's kind of like medicine, but for like technology. Like, people come to you with problems, you listen to what they have to say, you run some diagnostic tests, and you solve the problem, right? It's kind of just like medicine. But then I like didn't really feel fulfilled. Like I was helping people, but not in the way that I wanted to. I didn't feel like my work was very impactful. Then I thought about doing consulting and like healthcare consulting. But I don't know. It's just going through the interview process made me realize that it's more money driven than it is about helping people. And I just kept cycling back to this idea that I want to join medicine. And to be quite honest with you, I have very stereotypical Asian parents. So they like really heavily pushed medicine onto me. So that's why I kind of struggled, because I didn't know whether or not I wanted to do medicine for myself or because my parents were pushing me. But eventually it just kept circling back to that. And that's kind of how I decided that, I'm going to like stick with medicine and I'm going to dedicate myself to it. And doing that actually like reaffirms everything, because now that I'm in the thick of things and things are getting tough, I'm sleeping like 3-4 hours a day, I'm studying all the time. Luckily none of my things are mean, so I'm not getting chewed out, but some people are getting chewed out like on a regular basis. And I don't really have this sense of regret, even though like I'm miserable right now, because I know for a fact 100% this is what I want to do. So I implore all of you guys to make sure that this is what you want to do, because honestly, if you're smart enough to go into med school, you're smart enough to like get rich doing whatever it is you want to do. Like you'll be successful in business, you'll be successful in tech. If you're smart enough to go to med school, you guaranteed are going to be successful no matter where you go. So just make sure that medicine is something that you want to do.
All right, awesome. And then another question from the chat was, did you ever consider the MD PhD route? But just to expand on that, like, did you consider any other dual degrees? I know, Mylin, you're doing a master's as well alongside your DO. So, like, how did you come to that decision? Did either of you guys consider like other dual degrees?
So MD PhD, I think is more like on the PhD side rather than the MD side because even that you need the medical background, but you're mainly using it to approach your research from what I have an understanding for. Like I haven't met a medical doctor who's in PhD who practices. That's my experience. But for me, I chose my master's program, bioethics, is because you're going to be dealt with a lot of hard situations in the future, and I want to be prepared for that. It's like, let's say a patient's dying, what do you do? Or like the family member doesn't want, or family member finds out that the patient's dying, they don't want you to tell them, what do you do? Like, who's going to be in charge of that? So those like serious questions, that's why I chose to do my master's program. I know my school also offers an MBA program. I feel like a lot of people do that. I think it's interesting. It wasn't for me. I don't want to deal with business stuff, and that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much to add. I thought about doing an MPH, and I still might do one of those executive programs where you can do it at night when you're in like residency or as an attending. Um, but yeah, I agree with her. Like MD PhDs usually are doing it for the research. Like they're getting the MDs so they can do the clinical research because you need a doctor to actually administer the medication, give them informed consent, all that stuff. So they're more researchers than they are clinicians for the most part.
All right, cool. And then the last chat question, you guys kind of touched on this already, but I guess to expand on the DO residency programs question, is there any like pro or like con in particular in terms of being a DO instead of an MD applying to residency programs?
Yeah, I might be able to speak to this more because I'm like literally in the thick of things. I think there's more disadvantages than there are advantages, to be completely frank. I think the playing field is getting leveled, and I think the stigma against DOs is like slowly improving. There are a lot of programs who previously have never accepted DOs who are now accepting DOs. So, for example, someone in my school this year actually matched into anesthesiology at Yale. So, you know, we're getting into Ivy Leagues, like we're getting to great programs. You know, people you always hear people, one or two people matching to like UCSD or like UCI or, you know, UCs. I think last year we had someone, two or three people matching to Stanford. So there's no limit in what you can do if you're a DO, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you guys that there certainly are disadvantages and some people are just not going to accept you. You can have the highest board scores and they're just going to see the letters and realize that you're not a part of their clique, right? And those people are like slowly getting phased out. Those are usually the super old program directors. And hopefully by the time you guys are in med school, they're going to be gone. A lot of them are on their way out. And like the doctors who are like in their 40s and 50s who have trained with DOs or who have worked extensively with DOs, they don't see it as a difference anymore. Um, in terms of some benefits, like there's some hospitals that are run by DOs that used to be traditionally DO programs, and they still heavily favor DOs because we do like kind of learn like the DO stuff, like the manipulation stuff. But I think we also kind of have this like different philosophy in how we approach people in medicine, where we kind of want to approach them holistically. I hate that word, but like we really do. And not saying that MDs don't, but like that there's a huge emphasis on that in at least my school's curriculum. So a lot of hospitals that are traditionally DOs would prefer DOs. So like I know my hospital is like very, very DO friendly. And almost all the residents are DOs. And if you're thinking about something super competitive like orthopedic surgery, then there are like almost DO exclusive programs for like orthopedic surgery. But there's also the same for like on the MD side. So there's pros and cons, but I would say if you had to choose between an MD and DO school and everything else is equal, I would probably pick the MD school.
hold
but I
off
have no
on
regrets.
that. Hold off on that. I would not go to a Caribbean school, to be
Oh,
honest.
sorry. Yes, yes, definitely agree.
Yeah. So, my school is one of the oldest DO schools. It's like top five or something like that. It's pretty well rooted in the community, but something that I want to speak up on is the fact that my year is going to be pass fail for STEP and Comlex. And Comlex 2 also is not doing patient examination anymore. So they're making it a little bit harder for you to stand out if you don't have those scores. Even though technically, yes, like you are in quartiles, like you want to be higher in the quartile, but those are things to keep in mind. You might have to beef up your resume by doing a lot of extracurricular. That's why I think doing research while you're in undergrad is very important because it will more easily allow you to get research as you're in medical school. Just my opinion.
Awesome. And then,
Wait, sorry.
um,
One thing. I feel like this is a very important group to tell this to. If you look at the statistics, there's like two Caribbean schools that are really like that actually have a decent match rate. And if you think about their match rate, it's like the vast majority of those people like soap into it. So that means that they didn't match the first time and they had to go to the supplemental part to like match into a program. And that's when they scramble and just try to get any job that they can. So the statistics is after your first year, there's only a 50% chance of you actually passing your first year and going on to your second year. And of those who pass their second year, the vast majority of them continue on and graduate, right? But of those who graduate, only like 20% match into the program that they want in the specialty they want, and the rest of them are scrambling. So if you're going to the Caribbean school, the chances of you matching into a program that you want is like really low. It's incredibly low. So it's really not worth it. So I really caution you guys against applying to a Caribbean school. Like, please don't apply to a Caribbean school.
all right, warning taken. So with the other research question in the chat, I see you kind of answered it a bit, Brian, but are there ways to do research as an MD without pursuing an MD PhD or just as a DO, and are a lot of your peers doing research?
So a lot of my friends right now, if they haven't found research ready, we're scrambling to look for research because summer is approaching and I've heard mixed reviews on, you know, beef up your resume, go find research, or some people would be like, don't do anything during your last summer, because this is my last summer of my life. Like this will be the last summer because once you are done with boards, you're off to rotations and you're set for the rest of your life. You're gonna be working for the rest of your life. So this is literally the last summer of my life. And people are like, don't do anything. Just relax. Because once you start studying for boards, all hell is released and you're just stressed for the rest of your life. And another thing I wanted to mention, how I chose schools was based on match rates. So you can look at the school and see what specialties and what schools they matched into. And don't look just 1 year, look the last 5 years. And that was a pretty big determinant for me when I got it accepted to multiple schools. And that's how I chose my school.
Okay, so we just have a couple minutes left. So I guess with that time, can you guys give like some general closing thoughts about like what advice you could give a current pre-med, whether like a first year in college or third or fourth year, someone that's getting ready to apply, um, whether that's like study tips or looking for like financial resources or just literally anything that you think could help?
As a first year, I would just figure out what you want to do in life. Like, you're so young. I'm actually a mentor for Leaf and for the last 3 years. I've been mentoring first years for the last 3 years. And I tell them like, yeah, you maybe want to do medicine. That's why like we're partner up, but you really want to know like what you're really passionate about. And some people think it's being a doctor. Well, what if you want to help people in a hospital setting and you don't want to deal with the long hours and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You can even consider like PA or NP, just figure out what you want to do. Like, it's okay to change your mind. Same like in medical school about residency, it's okay to change your mind. If you're applying right now, I would just apply to as many as you can, especially if you have the fee assistance. That would help you so much. And um, so from what I've learned, interviews are given by stats. So if your stats is good and it matches the school, then you're most likely going to get an interview. But during the interview, all they care about is who you are as a person. So just let your personality shine and just talk about things that you're interested in, what you're passionate about. Honestly, during my interview here, I talked about true crime for like half an hour with my doctor. Like, she didn't care about what I had to say. She just wanted to see what I liked. So showing your interest, showing what you like, showing what you've done, I think that's really important. And that's gonna take you a long way.
Yeah. So I know that Mylin and I have like kind of portrayed like this jaded version of medicine, but to kind of wrap things up in a more positive light, especially me because I can be really negative. I think medicine is easily the best field to get into, especially for me. Like, you are going to be there at your patient's worst, but for the most part, you're going to be able to help them. And if you can't help them like health wise, then you can help them feel at peace with themselves. And it's a truly humbling experience to be able to be there for someone in their time of need. Because to us, it's just going to be just another person, another patient. But for them, we might be the last faces that they see, or we might be that one doctor that actually listened to them, or we could be that one person that really advocated for them and finally made them feel heard. So it's an incredibly amazing career because we get to really be there for people, and we get to be there at the happiest moments. Like when I delivered a baby for the first time, like I would never forget it. And I even asked the parents if I could take a picture of their baby because I don't ever want to forget it, you know? So you get to do some remarkable things. You get to see things that no one else gets to see. You get to see the inside of bodies. You get to like stick your finger in people's buttholes. You get to, do a lot of like cool shit that no one else gets to do. You get to see a lot of cool shit that no one else gets to see. So, it's a super humbling field, and it's there's nothing quite like it. And yeah, if that's something you're interested in, like definitely go for it. You're gonna have to work your tail off, but it's gonna be worth it. But like Mylan said, that there's no one way to get into this field. Like you don't have to be a doctor. Like if you realize that you want to have more time, more free time, and you don't mind like not being at the top of the totem pole, being a PA and being an MP or being a nurse, whatever, they're great fields. You get to be just as impactful. You just don't have like not all the responsibilities will be falling on you. So there's no like one set way to get to this field, and there's no one set way to practice. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I love it. I'm jaded, but I still love it. I wouldn't change a single thing about my path. I wouldn't change the fact I'm going to Western. I wouldn't change the fact that, you know, like I did my master's. I wouldn't change the fact that like I'm working this hard. Like I think everything happens for a reason. And I don't know. I'm really happy, but also really tired. So yes, that's med school.
Actually, what Brian said was very positive because I know UCLA is very hard. Like, come on, you guys. All the gunners, all the people that you have to deal with, all the competitiveness. But you have to remember, like, this is your journey. Just like how Brian said, like, he would never trade anything for what he's been through. And me, the same. Like, I wasn't that traditional. Yeah, I did bio. Yeah, I interned at hospitals, but I also did other things, and that's what I enjoyed. And whatever path, like, it takes you to, however long or however short, like, that's it's all okay. And don't compare yourself to how everyone else is doing. Don't compare yourself to how someone else's path is going. Like, that's so crucial. And I know it's very hard to not look at it, but it's honestly so worth it. And we are here at where we need to be.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, especially just for taking the time out of your day. I know you're both very busy, so we all really appreciate you coming. All the answers you gave were super helpful and informative and pretty eye-opening. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop the recording.